We're live now, I think. We're live now.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay, right. In which case, then we'll make a start. First of all, good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for making this meeting, and also a warm welcome to those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the council's website. Due to the government guidance and social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in line with the revised guidance received from the Department for Education. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the council website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of Forum who have video cameras to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphone muted except when I invite you to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the same way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand on the right-hand side of their screen. You can access the raised hand function by clicking on the attendees icon at the bottom of the screen. This will then show the attendees on the right-hand side of your screen. The blue hand function can be found at the bottom of the attendee list. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone, ask your question, and then mute it again to allow the officer to respond. I'll ask for your patience if we run into technical problems, and should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it's not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such a time as it can be reconvened. So members, we'll begin the meeting with a roll call to establish who is present, and I'll now pass over to Tamar in Democratic Services.
Okay, so Simon Bainbridge.
Good morning.
Liz Bassett.
Morning.
Christopher Bennett.
Good morning, present.
Suzanne Connell.
Good morning.
Sasha Howard.
Good morning.
Joanne Hardwick.
Good morning.
Ryan Kelsall. No, okay. John King.
Yes, good morning.
Jeremy Lloyd.
Yes, good morning.
Leah Miller.
Good morning.
Claire Palmer.
Good morning.
Deborah Parfitt.
Good morning.
Richard Spencer.
Morning.
Paul Strafford.
Morning.
Guy Underwood.
Morning.
And John Culpin.
Good morning.
And then from the observers, Councillor Simon Bywater.
Yes, I'm present.
Julie Comell.
Morning.
Councillor Peter Downs.
Present.
John Devine.
Present.
Andrew Reid.
Good morning.
And Councillor Simone Taylor.
Morning.
Yeah, that's everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. And for the first item on the agenda, will the Democratic Services Officer please report any absences?
I've received apologies from Adrian Ball, Patsy Perez and Joe McCrossan.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we carry on with the main agenda, just to sort of say, first of all, this is sadly that Rob Sanderson's last meeting at Forum as Democratic Services Officer, as this is his last week at the Cambridgeshire County Council as he heads into retirement. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of Forum to thank Rob for his public service, his advice and his wisdom over 8 years supporting Schools Forum, helping us navigate changes in the rules regarding Forum and Forum membership, and making sure that we follow policy and procedure. We wish you all the best for the future, Rob. Forum will also have received an email last week containing an awards letter from the Antarctic Place Names Committee received by the late Professor Alan Rogers' wife, namely an Antarctic place in tribute of her late husband's outstanding scientific contributions, which with her consent, the previous chairman, Philip Hodgson, had forwarded to me as being of interest to Forum. Those of you who've been on Forum for any length of time will, I'm sure, have fond memories of the great contribution that Alan also made to the work of Schools Forum as a vice chairman, and who, along with Philip as chairman, served on Forum in these roles for many years. So moving back to the agenda, does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Okay, I can't see anybody having raised their hands. So in which case then we'll move on. to the second item on the agenda, which is to review the minutes of the 6th of November. And I will do this by actually going through the minutes page by page. Again, please raise your blue hand if you wish to raise a point of accuracy only. So first of all, and this is on your agenda pack, that's page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and page 10. Again, I can't see anybody raising their hands. So can we agree the minutes as a correct record? And I will sign a hard copy when eventually we return to Shire Hall, which is becoming a constant phrase at the end of this particular part of the agenda. Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to item 3, the action log. An updated action log was included in the published papers for this meeting. And I'm going to ask John Lewis, do you have any further updates to add since publication? First of all, in relation to minute 160, review of membership and proportionality, which is the need for more ethnic diversity and forum membership, and also minute 165 to organise a meeting with schools that qualify for sparsity funding to understand the challenges and impacts. I'll hand over to John.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, members of Forum. It's been a tad busy, so neither of these actions have moved massively forward. We're going to come on to the membership of Forum, so happily update on where we're going with that. I will take these forward and endeavour to get these done ready for the next meeting. So apologies, Guy. I did say we'd get small schools together. That's still our intention. Nothing's moved data-wise, but we'll definitely organise that meeting for the spring term.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Do any members have any questions on the action log? Again, if you could raise your blue hand if you wish to raise any points. Okay, I can't see any raised hands, so we'll take the action log as noted. In which case then we'll move on to item number 4, which is an update on schools forum membership. And again, can I ask Rob please to introduce this report?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is really just to update what the position is on school forum membership. Really, as a result of Philip Hodgson, the former chairman, resigning before the last meeting, I thought it was just an opportunity to just set out the position of where we are with forum membership. And I mean, in terms of vacancies, we are now at 4 vacancies for the academy sector, and I believe John Lewis will be speaking to Andrew Reid regarding getting some appointments, but understand how busy it is at the moment. We did actually increase forum membership to 23 voting members as a result of a couple of years ago the Northstowe Secondary School coming into being. So that increased it from 22 to 23 places, but obviously now that Northstowe has become an academy, that place is no longer needed, and I am saying that we shouldn't really keep 23 members, because 22 is a large membership of voting members, especially when you take into account we also have 7 observers as well, so it is a very large meeting and the representation across the sectors is very well represented. So really, that is the position at the moment, for vacancies to be filled, and also there will be the normal once a year review of membership in terms of ensuring that the academy and maintained sectors are in balance compared to the overall pupil numbers in schools in the county. And that's really all I've got to say.
Thank you very much, Rob. Any members of Forum actually wish to ask a question to Rob on this particular item? Okay, again, I can't see anybody who wishes to raise a point, in which case then the recommendation is that Schools Forum is recommended to note the current position on vacancies on Schools Forum. And thank you, everyone. That concludes that particular part of the report. Okay, in which case then we move on to item 5. And can I please ask John Lewis and Martin Wade to introduce this report? We're going to be taking the report actually in stages and voting then as appropriate. and I'll ask John and Martin to indicate when they wish to pause feedback from members of Forum. So in which case then, I'll hand over first of all to John.
Thanks, Chair. So hopefully you got the report in front of you. We're going to start on page 69 of the report pack. And as John said, we'll jump between ourselves and cover different sections. And obviously there's a lot of information in this report that came from the previous meeting. So some of it we won't dwell on, but do ask questions as we end each section. So obviously we're going to cover all the sort of key remaining areas of the budget decisions for next year. We do not have yet the latest up-to-date figures from the Department for Education, so that's the census and the data that drives the formula behind it. We're expecting that on Friday to come out, so good timing with the end of term. And we will look at the next forum to refresh all the figures, the position, the amount of money in light of changing pupil numbers. And just looking at the early data, there is going to be some challenges. So we're seeing a decline in our primary role for the first time in many years between census. So there's obviously something to look at there, but a significant rise in our secondary numbers, which was to be expected with the growth that's coming through. So a refreshed set of data will come, and the decisions we make today will finalise the majority of where we are in terms of the budget decisions. But moving on to section 2 of the report, obviously the discussion we had at the last forum was around any top slice to support the high needs block pressures. We obviously went through the consultation process. We had a conversation at Schools Forum. Your decision was that you would not support that transfer. We took that view and a paper to the Children and Young People's Committee in November, discussed the position as a council, given we have this overseeing role of the school's budget and ultimately decide the school's budget in most circumstances. And the view from the CYP committee when we talked through the prospect of the high needs block, the challenges we're going to face longer term, was that we would make an application to the Secretary of State, as we had the previous year, to transfer 1% of the school's block to meet those high needs cost pressures. So that application went in on the 20th of November. Obviously, we don't know when that decision will be made. It was a very late decision last year. What we will bring back to you next time, though, is modelling with both that 1% transfer and a 0% transfer with those figures. The rationale behind doing that is that obviously, we can't sustain a huge budget deficit. So I think we're up about 26.5 million deficit on that budget, and it was felt that action needed to be taken, and we couldn't wait for something to happen because we've waited an awful long time. Last year, we were in the same position and nothing has changed. So that's the decision that's come forward. And obviously that will be decided by the Secretary of State in due course. Moving forward, obviously spending review announcements come out. No significant change for education came through that spending review. The 3-year package that was agreed 2 years ago continues. The only silver lining is the delay, or not silver lining, because it might not help our retention and recruitment of staff, but the delay in the £30,000 starting salary for teachers has been pushed back a year in light of the COVID pressures that schools are facing with their budgets. Obviously, the prospect of a nil pay award, which has been suggested, will also have an impact on that position. But overall, the relative change in schools funding has not been altered from the original plans going forward. 2.3 the report covers we have seen in early years a commitment of increased funding, £44 million. We have no details yet of that contribution coming into Cambridgeshire. We've speculated normally we get around 1% of any uplift in the national funding position. It will mean 4 to 5p extra an hour on early years funding rates, but we're guessing because we don't know that information yet. Positive news in a way, but we still hope there's a longer term commitment, and there are certainly messages that suggest there may be, that nursery school top-ups, the additional funding that goes to nursery schools for their additional responsibilities, will continue for another academic year. Get my head right, it is academic year of funding that will come through. So a significant amount of money for Cambridgeshire will continue. That's not confirmed. We have seen some Education Select Committee minutes that puts that formally in writing, but we don't have any allocations yet. We don't have any firm details of the way that's going to work. So obviously key is now waiting for those final figures to come out. And when we get to the next forum, obviously we will digest, review, and then bring back the final draft budget proposal to the January meeting. So I think, Chair, if you're happy, I think before we move into the next section, I'll just stop there for any questions or comments. Decision making is none at this point, because obviously that's the role of the local authority to make that suggestion around that change, but happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Does anybody have any comments they wish to make at this particular point? Okay, again,
just got his hand up, John.
Sorry?
Peter Downs.
Okay, Peter, just a reminder, Peter, if you could use the blue hand function, and I can probably see.
Yeah, there it is. That's it. Good. Right. Yes, just for information on the question of the deficit in the high needs block, you might be interested to know that Cambridgeshire is the 7th largest deficit in the country. We had a meeting recently of the F40 group, and this problem was one of the main items on the agenda, and we had a bar chart showing the distribution of the deficit. Most local authorities are in deficit, not all, most are, but we're not the largest. We're the 7th. We're in the 7th position, if that's any consolation. And there are people like Kent and Sussex and so on who are even worse off than we are. Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
Just for information.
Any further comments? Okay, in which case then, would you like to carry on, please, John?
Yeah, I'll hand over to Martin then to cover the sort of block position and growth.
Okay then, so as John's already said, we're still waiting for the final figures to come through. What we did receive last night was the what's known as the APT, so the Authority Pro Forma tool, which we use to pull together the budget information. So I can start populating that over the next couple of days. Big things on that we'll need to consider will be like changes to business rates, because obviously, as we've said previously, that has a significant impact on the overall kind of level of funding available for distribution. The table at 2.5 shows the current indicative block figures that we've received based on the previous census data. We do expect, based on the kind of the overall changes in pupil numbers, that both the schools block and the high needs block will be slightly higher when we receive the final allocations. But effectively, that doesn't mean there's more money, because that's just effectively funding the growth that we've seen between the two census points. As John's already mentioned, I think one of the big concerns is this is the first year we've seen a net reduction in primary pupil numbers. So they're down about 170 in net reduction between October 2000 and 2020, whereas in the secondary age sector, in secondary schools, we've seen a net increase of close to 900 pupils when comparing like for like. Obviously, within that, we're seeing individual schools obviously going to see reductions in pupil numbers, and some are going to see significant growth in pupil numbers depending on their individual circumstances. So that will obviously have an impact on final budgets. Interestingly, in the special sector, we're continuing to see an increase in numbers. Numbers have increased by about 150 pupils between October 2019 to October 2020 census dates. So we're up to about 1,437 pupils now in the special sector in totality, which I think is an interesting and kind of reflects the trend that we're seeing elsewhere on high needs. In terms of growth funding, I previously gave you an estimate of what we thought the required subsidy would be for growth funding based on the amount we receive from government for growth compared to what it's actually costing us to fund growth for new schools and for existing schools whilst they grow to meet basic need. The table in 2.6 shows what the latest position for that is. It's not actually as bad as we thought it was going to be initially. So the current estimate of the required subsidy is in the region of £1 million. Obviously, still is a significant amount, but when you can compare that to the 1.6 million that it was last year and closer to 2 million it was the year before, that figure has actually come down slightly, so has less of an impact overall. As John said, once we get the rest of the data, I'll start to pull that all together, and then we'll circulate that for the next forum with the kind of the budgets in terms of that data that we actually have, including variations to pupil numbers, and also do some analysis of the changes to the ADACI funding that we've spoken about previously, just to show how that's impacted at individual school level as well. However, based on some initial analysis of that, it doesn't look as though that's going to be as significant as we first thought on the original data. So I'll pause at that point and take any questions on that section of the report.
Thank you very much, Martin. And first of all, if I ask Liz to speak.
Yeah, I just was interested to hear what Martin said about the number of pupils going into special schools, because certainly in my area, with my cluster, with my CPH hat on, people are very concerned that there are 2 potential planned builds in the cluster that I'm in, the Ely area. When we're talking about pupil numbers in primary going down, and there are at least 2 schools in Ely I know of who are really struggling because they haven't got even half capacity almost for what they can manage in reception places. And then we've also got a massive amount of heads saying that they are holding children in primary school that are awaiting special school places. And we have been told very recently by somebody in the START team that there are no spaces in special schools in Cambridgeshire until September 2022. So it's a really concerning picture, and I wondered if anybody had any comments to make on what the plan going forwards for this sort of thing was, and whether we should be, as a county, putting more spending into special school placements than building extra primary schools, really.
John, Martin?
In terms of demography, obviously new housing development generates new builds. Developer contributions on the whole, we do not negotiate for new special schools. That's not part of the demographic forecast because there's no modelling of how many children may come out of a particular development. I think your point around the need for more special school places kind of follows on from our conversation last time about us needing more money to fund high needs places. If we haven't got the money, I can't fund them. You know, if you haven't given us the funding through the top slice, there is absolutely no way we can deliver that. We just don't have the resources to do it. Obviously, what we do each year is we are looking at growth. We have managed to bring 2 new special schools online, but there is not an infinite amount of resource, and we are very much stuck with what we've got and what we can generate and move forward. You know, there is a new round of funding opening up for new special schools, free school special schools, which we will be looking at and potentially bidding in on. But regardless of the capital side, which I think is probably the easier element of the discussion, there is no money to set up a new special school. You know, we're £1 million down for every special school that we open before we actually place any children there, technically. So, and with a £26 million deficit, we just don't have that resource. So unfortunately, the challenge is now sitting with schools, and we completely understand that. And we will do our best to move children through, you know, to look at that interchange between the 2. But without additional funding, there is only an amount that we can do to support that. So I'm afraid I can't give you an answer, but I can give you an explanation.
Have any answers come out of the SEND review in terms of future direction of the LA?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very clear, and there's some in this paper around the enhanced resource provision. We're very clear on the SEMH outcomes as well. The challenge is whatever we, you know, so I've obviously had the conversation with you about, you know, we need more, you know, sort of units and provision. They're fine. We all accept that. But without any money, without taking any money off schools, we don't have the ability to do it. Unless the government comes up with more money, we can't generate it. We can't, you know, it's not possible to save money. We can't take money off special schools in the high needs block. So we don't have too many choices. Whatever we might like to do and need to do is a different matter to what we can actually afford to do. So it's an impossible situation we're finding ourselves in. And, you know, I think great credit to everyone. They've done a great job supporting children and doing the right things. You know, we have managed to get more provision, you know, but that provision is simply not sufficient with the amount of resources that we have. Hence, you know, why we've been working very closely with MPs. Simon supported me in a meeting with those MPs. They've had a letter from us to draft to send off to the Secretary of State that outlines all of these concerns and issues.
So just to clarify, John, there is no way in which 106 funding can be used to contribute to the overall county provision for special schools. I mean, I take the point that it has to be very much linked to the community in which that development is taking place. But, you know, say for every 100 houses which are being built, it's quite possible, based on the numbers increasing throughout Cambridgeshire in terms of those going to special school, that perhaps 1 out of every 50 pupils or whatever it may be will go to a special school. There's no facility to enable that to happen.
It's down to individual negotiations. There's no set formula because, again, how do you define the needs of that child and where they need to go and the type of provision they need? So it's very difficult. What we can do is negotiate, and we do negotiate. So, for instance, take an example of the Alconbury secondary school. We've managed to negotiate the ability to set another special school up on that site as part of the 106 agreement and a side agreement to that. But there's no, you know, we're not getting any more money for the elements of the build, and certainly the revenue costs are not supported anyway. So, you know, I think the conundrum around capital is a lot more straightforward. Obviously, we can borrow, we can make requests to government for that. But if we build it, actually running it is the challenge. We don't have the revenue funding to support it. And, you know, that's why we come along and talk to you about relative pressures to try and see whether there's anything we can do to do it. But, you know, we come back to the flaws of the high needs funding arrangements ultimately, because we know, and, you know, Liz has articulated it, the growth in numbers is in SEN, but we don't, it's not coming through, the money's not coming through.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Okay, thank you. I cannot see further comments, and obviously this is a matter that we'll come back to in future forum meetings in 2021. In which case then, with no further comments on that, can I ask either you, John, or Martin to move on to the next item on the report?
Yeah, no problem. So section 3 talks about the insurance arrangements for maintained schools. Previously, this formed part of the original consultation that was circulated back in October. However, we felt that actually, in order for schools to make a more informed decision, we'd provide some additional information. So we ran a separate, basically one question consultation, asking schools to consider whether they wanted to stay as part of the local authority insurance scheme or move to the DFE operated risk protection arrangement. As you can see in the summary extract in section 3.2, it's quite overwhelming in favour of remaining with the LA scheme, close to 90% compared to 8% moving to the RPA with 2% unsure. So based on that additional information, I asked for sort of any questions or comments on that particular area, but then also ask maintain primary school representatives to vote on approval of the continuation of the dedelegation for the insurance scheme at £21 per pupil.
Thank you very much, Martin. So if any maintained school members have comments on the results of the consultation, please can you raise your hand? Okay, I cannot see any comments there, in which case then maintained primary school representatives only are asked whether they wish to approve the local authority insurance dedelegation arrangements at £21 per pupil or move to the DFE risk protection arrangement. And therefore, can I ask the following in turn if they approve of the continued LA insurance dedelegation arrangements or move to the RPA? First of all, Liz Bassett.
I approve.
Guy Underwood.
Approve.
And Sasha Howard.
Approved.
Okay, thank you. I think, Tamar, that's a fairly straightforward one.
Thank you.
Okay, in which case then, Schools Forum are asked to approve the following on a line-by-line basis. So first of all, if I can go to Martin to talk us through capital expenditure, or John.
Apologies, no, can we hold that bit until a little
Okay.
bit later on the
Okay.
agenda? Yeah, we'll come on to that after the next section. Thank you.
In which case, over either to you or John.
Yeah, fine. Okay, so section 4 is just a little bit more of information in terms of the in-year position, in terms of the dedicated schools grant, but also a little bit of a summary in terms of how the deficit has arisen since 2016-17. So Appendix A provides some detailed information about the spend since, so I'm just going to the page, Appendix A since 2018-19. So it shows how the dedicated schools grant budgets have been allocated and spent for the last 2 financial years, and then also the current financial year that we're actually in, including a forecast of the position to the end of the year. At the start of the year, we were forecasting an overall in-year deficit of around 12.7 million on the DSG, primarily around the high needs block pressures that we've discussed. To the end of November, that figure is now reduced slightly to 11.3 million. So obviously still a considerable in-year overspend forecast, but down about 1.4 million on where we started the year in terms of our original forecasts. So as I say, that shows where expenditure has increased over the last few years. So just taking a couple of lines for examples, you can see in the line that says funding to special schools and units, that spend there has gone up from about 27.4 million 2 years ago, and this year we're predicting about 32.4 million on that area, and that kind of shows what John was saying earlier about when we do put additional places into special schools, that's obviously adding a significant additional cost to the overall high needs block. Likewise, another area where we've seen significant increase in expenditure is in out of school tuition, where that expenditure has increased significantly over the last 2 or 3 years for various reasons, and then equally with SEN placements, which has increased by about 1 million, and there's some further information later on in the report around that particular area. So that's really just to give a summary of where the areas of expenditure have been over the last couple of years and what we're looking at forecasting going forward. This information is presented to CYP committee as part of the monthly finance and monitoring reports, and the intention is we'll bring the in-year position back to forum at every meeting we have from now until the end of the year, and then ongoing beyond that, just so you can see how the position is changing in year on those areas. Bear with me, I'll just go back to the other part of the report. So yeah, so as I say, in 4.2, back in the main section of the report, this shows us how the cumulative deficit has increased since 2016-17, and how we're forecasting it to increase for this year and potentially into next year as well, based on current assumptions. So effectively, before 2016, we didn't have a DSG deficit. We had a surplus amount we carried forward year on year, and as you can see, that has gradually increased year on year, with that cumulative then coming up to a current forecast of around 27-28 million at the end of this current financial year. So I'll pause there for any comments and questions or points of clarity on that section of the report.
First of all, Councillor Downs.
Could you explain why the forecast expenditure in the high needs block is dropping by 3.2 million next year, given what people have been saying about the increasing numbers?
In terms for it, well, that includes the additional funding that we're expecting to get from the DfE in the high needs block, but it also includes the savings proposals that we've already put in place through the SEND Recovery Board. Obviously, some of those savings proposals are reliant on decisions going forward about how we may or may not reduce funding, as we've spoken about previously. So at the moment, there are assumptions in that around future levels of expenditure going forward into next year.
Thank you, Martin. Does anybody have any further comments? Okay, if you want to move on to the next stage of the report, Martin.
Okay, so Central School Services block, we discussed this in quite a lot of detail last time in terms of the approach the DfE are now taking in terms of reducing the historic spend from year to year. The table at 5.2 shows the current year budgets for each of the Central School Services block lines and the indicative figures for 21-22. Again, these were discussed at the last meeting, but this is just to show what the latest position is for those particular areas. So contribution to combined budgets has reduced by a further £500,000, and if you think back, that was actually contribution to combined budgets was as high as I think 3.5 million a couple of years ago. So we've been gradually reducing that down over the last couple of years. The EastNet schools broadband contract, that's again been reduced to reflect the further 20% reduction that again we discussed at the previous meeting, and the ICT service have asked me to highlight the fact that the EastNet invoices will be sent out to schools at the start of April 2021 for the additional costs that relates to. In terms of the other areas, school admissions, servicing of schools forum, etc., we're not proposing any changes to those amounts. They're relatively small in the grand scheme of things, but we're not proposing any changes to the funding there. National copyright licenses, that's one that is set by the DfE, so we are waiting a figure for that in terms of that amount. And as we discussed last time, the retained duties funding is an element which relates to per pupils for the services which are still provided by the local authority for all schools. Then the final line, it relates to the high needs block, which effectively this is the amount that we agreed, effectively the residual amount which sits within the central services block that last year and this year we agreed would be moved to the high needs block to contribute somewhat to some of those pressures. That figure may change. Effectively that will be a balancing amount once we get the final allocation from the DfE in totality. So 5.3, although as I said we have agreed majority of those funding streams at the previous meeting, we are formally required to approve on a line by line basis. So when we get to the end of this section, I would ask that members of Forum do formally approve the levels of central expenditure from capital expenditure from revenue, apologies, which is the broadband contract, school admissions and the servicing of schools forum on that section, but we can do that when we get to the very end of this section. John, I don't know if you wanted to pick up the next few points about the contribution to combined budgets.
Thanks, Martin. Obviously, last time you asked me some questions around where that contribution went to. I think you very generously offered me £500,000 extra actually for EPs, but I'm not sure we ever agreed that in the end. But anyway, it was nice to be mentioned. You particularly asked around where it went, so we've given you a 5.5 a list of where the allocation goes. It's spread across a range of different services, and any change would mean a reduction directly in those areas. The key one I think we picked up a lot around last time was the early intervention family workers. So we've given you some detail on that service. How does it work? The capacity that we have and the process we go through and what they support in schools. There was a challenge around the vacancies we had in the Cambridge City team. We continue to have challenges recruiting to that role. We brought in some external support to help us to recruit to those in January. I was asked where the money had gone that was previously allocated, where we haven't been able to fill those jobs. Just to reassure you, every penny was left in the DSG and has been recycled in the deficit that we carried forward. So it doesn't come into the local authority. The posts are separately identified and allocated as part of that. So lots of details there. Obviously, we have had some changes in that service. It previously sat in social care. It moved to education midway through the year, and now overseen by Anna Wayland and Michael in those services. So happy if individual forum members or heads want to raise any further concerns or deal with those today in the meeting, but we agreed last time that funding would remain, and it just gives you the further detail that sits behind the requests that were made last time. So happy to take any questions on that before we move on to the decision-making elements that we need to cover.
Okay, does anybody have any comments? Okay, once again, I can't see any hands raised. Okay, in which case, if members are happy, we'll take the three items do require your approval. And the first one is actually about capital expenditure from revenue. So what I'll do is a roll call of voting members. Can you indicate when I call your name if you agree or disagree or wish to abstain on this decision? So firstly, Simon Bainbridge.
I agree.
Liz Bassett.
Agree.
Christopher Bennett.
I agree.
Susanna Connell. You're muted, Susanna.
Yeah, no, sorry, my computer started to play up. I agree.
Sasha Howard.
I agree.
Joanne Hardwick.
Agree.
Ryan Kelsall. You're muted, Ryan. Okay, thank you. John King.
I agree.
Jeremy Lloyd.
Agree.
Leah Miller.
Agree.
Claire Palmer.
Agree.
Deborah Parfitt.
Agree.
Richard Spencer.
Agreed.
Paul Stratford.
Agree.
Guy Underwood.
Agree.
And I agree. Can I ask Democratic Services to read out the results?
That's unanimous.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. And the second vote is on school admissions. Again, I'll do a roll call. Our voting members, again, can you indicate whether you agree, disagree, or wish to abstain? Simon Bainbridge.
I agree.
Liz Bassett. Does that agree, Liz? Yes. Christopher Bennett.
I agree.
Susanna Connell.
I agree.
Sasha Howard.
I agree.
Joanne Hardwick.
Agree.
Ryan Kelsall.
Agree.
John King.
Agree.
Jeremy Lloyd.
Yes, I agree.
Leah Miller.
Agree.
Claire Palmer. So that was agree, yes.
Sorry, agree, yep.
Deborah Parfitt.
Agree.
Richard Spencer.
Agreed.
Paul Stratford.
Agreed.
Guy Underwood.
Agree.
And I too agree.
And that's unanimous.
And to the third vote, which is servicing of schools forum. And again, roll call of names, agree, disagree, or you wish to abstain. Simon Bainbridge.
Yep, agreed.
Liz Bassett.
Agreed.
Christopher Bennett.
Agreed.
Susanna Connell. Okay, thank you. Sasha Howard.
Agreed.
Joanne Hardwick.
Agreed.
Ryan Kelsall.
Agreed.
John King.
Agreed.
Jeremy Lloyd.
Agreed.
Leah Miller.
Agreed.
Claire Palmer.
Agree.
Deborah Parfitt.
Agreed.
Richard Spencer.
Agreed.
Paul Stratford.
Agreed.
Guy Underwood.
Agreed.
And I too agree.
Again, that was unanimous.
Okay. Thank you very much. In which case, we move on to the last section of that report, which is on the high needs block. And
Okay, thank you.
John or Martin.
Yeah, thank you. So as I already kind of mentioned, Appendix A shows how the spend on the specific areas has increased over the last 2 to 3 years in there. And one of the questions at the last meeting was specifically in respect to the SEN placements budget, where you know, in instances where there's not a suitable placement in county in a mainstream school, for special school, they may be placed in, pupils may be placed in independent special schools or out of county. So the table at 6.2 just shows a little bit of a comparison on how the budget was set at the start of the year and the assumptions around the numbers, and then what the actual position in year actually was, and the actual outturn or the forecast outturn for the year in terms of that. So as you can see, spend has increased year on year in terms of the overall cost of provision for this group of young people. And equally, as you can see, the numbers of placements that we're having to make each year are increasing as well. And again, that kind of ties back with the earlier discussions around the increasing need and increasing pressure on special school places. What is encouraging is that we're managing within reason to keep the average unit cost for these placements reasonably static over the last couple of years. Still obviously significant that an annual average placement is in excess of £50,000. Obviously is something that we are trying to control. The narrative then 6.3 and 6.5 kind of gives a little bit of background from the service as to what is happening and what are they doing to try and address some of these issues. So I don't know if John wants to add anything more on that particular section, or go on to talk about the enhanced resource.
No, just to reinforce, obviously that area of placements and high cost placements has been a focus for us, and that's fed through with some of the savings that Peter identified through the ongoing spend in the high needs block and the predictions. Just briefly, and I've covered this, I think, answering Liz's question. There is some details in 6.6 to 6.8 around our commissioning intentions in terms of new specialist provision. I think we have previously set up this type of provision. It hasn't been well managed or had the proper oversight, both leadership and commissioning for outcomes. And we want to make sure that part of the process, when we do look at geographically in the county where we need that new type of support and particular needs, that it's well commissioned and we hold the provider to account, but equally make sure that it's safe and appropriate and outcomes are strong as well. So just an update there on where we are. Obviously, we'll be talking to schools in the new year about how they could access that and take some of that forward. But again, with the caveat, we don't have any more money, so it's going to be a really challenging position, but we still want to continue with that type of move forward. So I think that's everything we had on the high needs block. So happy to take any questions, John.
Thank you very much, John. Anybody wish to make any comments on that section of the report?
John, just to say that the review of the ERBs is very welcome, and some parity around that, because I think that's an area where schools could do more, and it's been a long time coming, I think, and it would benefit everyone.
Yeah, thanks. I agree. I think that's why we're keen to get this right, because I think it is a really good model and we've had huge success from it, but now's the time to put it all on a level playing field and make sure it's clear and transparent for everyone. So that's what we're trying to get out of this process.
Thank you, John. Simon Bainbridge.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I was just going to put a bit of context to the numbers that we're seeing coming through at both my schools since August. We've got 20, well, we did have 20 places in September 2021 to allocate, and we've had 160 requests for placement. So that just gives Forum a little idea of the amount of requests we're getting through at the moment. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. In terms of the question regarding sort of independent providers, what conversations have had with those providers in terms of actually reducing their costs?
So what we did, John, is we identified all the high cost placements and did a proper review of the commissioning of those. We went and looked at every education, health and care plan, what was in it and what was the provider currently offering. We've also had discussions with providers on block, because we do place a lot of children in individual provision. You know, there's a group of them go to a certain location, geography based, and we've certainly had the conversations about bulk buying, that going beyond spot purchasing and making sure we're making a long-term commitment to try and drive down that cost. It's a really challenging sector to work with. It provides a lot of flexibility and support for us, but equally, the cost bases are high because there is high numbers of staff needed, and these are the children that we simply cannot meet need on the whole within our existing provision. Obviously, where we lose tribunals and have to place externally, that's a cost we can't avoid, although obviously there's always a negotiation around cost, and I think we've got much better at that in the last a year has shown that we can save money in that area, and our intention now is to move down that list and review the lower cost placements, because actually some are very reasonable, but there's still grounds to have that negotiation, particularly when children's needs change and hopefully improve, and that's what we're looking to deliver.
So it's not your view that, in a sense, choosing my words carefully, that not achieving value for money with these providers, and they're not using the opportunity of the fact that we kind of need these places to actually sort of artificially raise their prices, I suppose is what I'm saying.
I couldn't possibly comment in public on that, but what we do know is that by working together with Peterborough, we're in a much stronger position than we used to be, because we are placing lots in the same provision. So we are in a more positive position to have that conversation with higher numbers than we would have previously, where we may only have one or two. So I think the challenge is there throughout. Obviously, one of the things we have done is look at, would it be cheaper to do something in-house? What can our special schools do if we had more space? So Joanne's on here. We're creating some provision out in the St Neots area, because we are leaking children into Bedfordshire. We want to do the right thing for our children. I want to keep them locally, and that's unfortunately the downside of independent school provision, is that it's not always on the doorstep, and it pains me to send a child an hour in a taxi or require them to have residential when they don't need to. So it's been a really clear focus of us about making that provision available locally, but it's really tough to do that as well.
Thank you. Richard?
Hi there. Just picking up on Simon's point about the pressure on places, it's really useful to see ASC and SCMH being identified as particular challenges in terms of places, and echo what Ryan said about a welcome look at enhanced resource. Has there been any work on identifying parts of the county in particular where pressure is greatest, or on the phases on which need is greatest? Because I think that'd be quite interesting and useful going into the new year.
Yeah, we've undertaken a large sufficiency review. We have maps of where children are coming from and going to. It's quite scary how far some children are moving around the county to access. There is some conversation needed around that provision about recasting. We with Martin Bacon Academy, for instance, the new special school in Northstowe coming in, we've managed to rework some of the arrangements so we can keep children closer to home and work it through. We have identified some pinch points, particularly in the East Cams, Fenland and the Huntingdonshire area, about the gaps that are there. Although provision is available, we want to try and do more with that. So that's when we start to overlay the enhanced resource provision that we may create. It's going to be really important to get that geographically well placed. And we're very minded of that. Hence why we've started to work with a couple of providers about, we definitely know we need something there. Let's start there, and then we can build that role. But it will come down to, ultimately, if we don't need it in an area, we won't put it there. But it does need some adjustments, and we don't have catchment areas, but we need to get much more into the principle of keeping children close to home.
Thank you very much, John. Any further comments? In which case, then, we'll draw that particular item to a close, and obviously just to note those comments and note the report. Okay, thank you very much. In which case, we move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the board agenda plan. And can I just ask Tamar then, please, to present this report?
So they have the new schools funding update report going to the next meeting, and then there'll be a brief report on new dates for the forum. I haven't got any other reports on the agenda plan at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any comments or want to ask a question regarding the forward agenda plan? In which case, then, can I ask for, please, to note the agenda plan? In which case then we're at the end of the meeting. First of all, my thanks to everybody for attending over the course of this calendar year, especially in the changed circumstances we've actually found ourselves. Your continued attendance and support of Forum is appreciated. And can I also extend thanks as well to Tamar and to Monica for supporting this particular meeting. And obviously to John Lewis and his team at the local authority. I'm sure all of you would agree they've done an absolutely fantastic job doing the particular challenges of this calendar year, and in particular since March. And certainly I think all of us would hugely thank John for his work and his daily briefings and keeping us informed and up to date in terms of the ever-changing DfE guidance. It's been really appreciated by all of the schools and the academy. So thank you very much. And in which case then, it just leaves me to wish everybody obviously the best for Christmas, whatever you choose to do and however you actually choose to meet family and friends. And of course that may well change as well in the next 24 hours. But whatever you do, stay safe and have a well-deserved rest. That concludes the business of this meeting. Thank you for your attendance, and also for any people watching the meeting. I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Chairman. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, John.
Christmas, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Happy Christmas.
Thanks, John. Merry Christmas all.
Thank you.